Please. Thank you, Robot Lady. I also work for Strong Women, Strange Worlds, and our host, we have one particular host, and every time she turns on the recording, she always says, "Thank you, Robot Lady." So it's kind of stuck in my head. Anyway, so let me introduce myself for those who don't know me, which is probably none of you, but anyway, let me be redundant. I'm Christiane Knight. You can call me Christiane or Chris or Yo Pinky. I don't care. Um, my pronouns are both she, her, and they, them. I live in Baltimore and I write about Baltimore kind of as a character in a lot of my stories. It is a very vibrant background that I feel holds a lot of potential and underlying magic. So I like to put it into my stories. And also, I know this city the best because I was born here and lived here for a long time. I have lived in other places, but for some reason, it's always Baltimore that I put the spotlight on. I think in part because Baltimore kind of gets a bad rep. And not to say that we don't deserve it in some ways. We're kind of hooligans sometimes, but the city has a lot of good in it. And a lot of the problems here are caused by the inequality and inequity that is baked into the system. So those are things I like to address in my stories as well. Um, I have four books out now. Four. I have the series, The Stories of the Illyrianan, which are fantasy, contemporary fantasy with fae and weirdo mortals, all based in Baltimore. There's a lot of music and social commentary and weird magic and banter, and they're fun. Um, I also have the new one, which is A Small Light in the Darkness, which this is the very first book that I did everything on myself except for editing. I did the cover, I did the formatting. I'm very, very proud of the formatting. Formatting is a pain in the butt, guys. I enjoyed it, but it's a pain in the butt. Um, I, of course, did the writing, and of course, I'm doing all of the talking about it, all of the getting it out into the world, which is something I've done with all of my books. So this book was a learning process in a lot of ways. It's also the very first science fiction based speculative fiction book that I've put out. I have written some other science fiction stories in the past, but I've never put them out into the public because they weren't ready. I wasn't ready. Um, I don't really, when I write, I don't think about genre so much. I just write, and then what the story is meant to be kind of happens. For those who don't know, I call myself a discovery writer. Some people call it pantsing, but really what it is like I start out with that concept, the base concept. Usually a couple of characters pop up in my head, and the concept, which is the classic speculative fiction concept of what if. Um, and like for the Fae books, it is what if there was magic hidden in Baltimore, the most unlikely of places that people might think to have magic. For Small Light in the Darkness, it is more about, well, let me pull up what I've wrote and I'll read it to you because that's a better way for me to stay focused if I can find where my paper is. So I said about this, I wrote a story. It's speculative fiction, but about relationships and what we look for in them and how we can be manipulated by them. It's also about what happens when we tamper with our brains, specifically when those who are in charge of said brain tampering don't have our best interests at heart. Additionally, it looks at the defining differences between what makes us who we are and who we might be if circumstances are slightly changed. So, yeah, a lot of thoughts about what it means to be human and desperate to be seen and understood. It's a story about relationships and what we for in them and how we can be manipulated by them. But it's also about finding out who you really are. And I'll tell you the blurb from the back of the story in case you haven't read it. Um, Trist has a habit of making connections that feel satisfying at first, but never last. She takes risks in order to find meaningful interactions, but still feels unfulfilled. Trist extends that search through a poetic post she makes on an online bulletin board, hoping that someone's response will match her vibe and maybe turn into something deeper. She gets the response she hoped for, enigmatic, fascinating, engaging, and anonymous. Triss decides to call them by the name Foe, based on a reference that they made about Fomalhaut, the loneliest star. The pair slowly build a rapport through emails, then text messages, and then finally connecting via a private app. One night during a dangerous thunderstorm, Foe abruptly disappears from their chat and does not return. The events that lead from that night introduce Triss to a world she'd never imagined: a rich, lawless family, unethical experiments, and a terrible betrayal. Worst of all, she learns that Foe isn't who she thought. Or is he? Dun dun dun. And let me tell you, it is really difficult for me to talk about this story because there's a lot happening and it's not what people might expect, especially because it is a slow-paced story in some regards when it starts out because it's very interpersonal. The beginning is almost epistolary, where it's just Trist and Foe talking back and forth through text, and Trist talking about her life and what got her to this point. And that's the part I will read to y'all so you can get that feel for that. After a certain point, things start to escalate and build. So when I talk about this book, I tell people to be patient and enjoy the coziness of it because that build is important to the story. It's just really hard to talk about the stories you've written in general. It really is because like you see the full picture, right? Like you've got the whole thing in your head. And then you have to like condense it down into this little thing that you feed to people and are like, come on, you can really love this from this tiny little thing. And it's yeah, it's just really difficult, like distilling all of those words and thoughts and feelings into this pithy little back of the book blurb. It sucks. It totally sucks. I've gotten better at it, but this book really, really stymied me. And yeah, I've had a couple of people drop words like cozy, which is true. I hesitate to use the word cozy because people have expectations about it, but two different people have used it, and I think that's fair. Romantic, it's not a romance, but there is romance in there, and mystery. And yeah, I agree with all of those. Those are not marketing words that are good for like putting into a little shell in Amazon and being like, here, these people, because it confuses people, but they all do apply. And let me tell you, it's really hard to talk about this book without giving things away to y'all. Gosh, it's so difficult. Um, but anyway, I guess what I should do is maybe read from it if that's what everybody would like. I'm gonna take a second and have some of this tea lemonade. Uh, so what I'm going to do is read from the front of the book, so the first chapter. And I suggest getting cozy and comfortable. And I will start at the beginning and go until I can't read anymore, which is probably going to be about a chapter. I'm lost in the echoing city streets, but the woods still call my name. Looking for someone who remembers glass fault and thought it enchanting, which is why we don't have it anymore, right? Nothing magical stays around here for long but us, wandering and wondering why we're still so alone. Extra points for listening to music when you should be sleeping, staring out windows hoping for a glimpse of something unexpected, or being the one that people bring the pretty rocks and feathers to show. I looked at the words I'd typed into the text box, as florid and cryptic and utterly desperate as anything I'd published in my youth in the shitty little copier paper zines, the kind you can only buy in alternative bookstores and tiny record shops, harder to find every day. I had a handful of pen pals from those frail publications, and we all sent each other the same kind of words interspersed with heavily edited details about our lives. It was enough to feel a genuine connection, but all of us suffered the same issue. We were incredibly lonely and had failed to find someone like us nearby. We were limited to words and emails, letters, and social media posts. It's not that we couldn't video chat or call each other. We could, and did once or twice, but it never felt right. The magic wasn't there. It made me anxious and I tried too hard. I always imagined that the other person was left disappointed by who I actually am. Not pretty enough, with a goofy accent, not poetical or clever, just a weirdo who seemed much cooler on paper. I needed a title for the post. The stupid AI assistant that continually attempted to insert itself into even the most mundane tasks suggested anachronism lovers for an opener. I hated that immediately. It was clunky, unpoetic, and most importantly, not at all what I was trying to convey. I didn't eschew the aesthetic of present times. I just wanted to enhance it with a part of me that wondered if what might happen in the future if they did finally figure out how to make AI live up to what they promised it would be. Would it ever be convincing enough to fool me or understand what I wanted? I decided on gathering up the stars hand in hand because it evoked what I was yearning for, and double checked that I used my throwaway email account. After I made sure that I specified Baltimore and agreed to the posting rules, I held my breath and hit publish. It wasn't the first time I'd done this, throwing the equivalent of a letter in a bottle into the electronic ocean while hoping for the best. Usually I'd get a smattering of replies, most of which were thinly veiled attempts to get into my pants, despite the email writer having no idea what I looked like. If all it was interested in was getting laid, I'd be set. Of course, that might also come with the side of getting murdered, but so does regular dating. One thing I'd come to realize is that the people who use these sections of the bulletin board, including me, like to take risks. I got those responses because eventually the people trolling the boards find what they're looking for. Occasionally, I'd get something a little more meaningful. There was a guy who traded messages with me for a while who was really into riding bikes and squatting in city-owned properties, and he always had interesting stories to tell. He explained to me how he and his friends would create comfy spaces in the woods near the Jones Falls, complete with furniture to make it feel like a living room surrounded by trees. I always marveled that they never got caught in their urban camping adventures, but one thing I've noticed about Baltimore is that if you act like what you're doing is normal, especially if you're a white dude, most people won't question you, not even cops. As soon as they get a whiff of guilt, though, all bets are off. There were a few other poetry readers or lyrics quoters that posted regularly, but I never connected with any of them, not for lack of trying. The impression I got is that they wanted to be the star of their show, the one who someone else thirsted for. There's no room for two of the same types in their world, or at least that's how it felt. Which, fair enough. Far be it from me to judge why someone would be looking for anonymous validation from the internet. I mean, it would be disingenuous for me to look down at anyone else's motivation when I'm doing something similar. It took a week to get a response that wasn't nonsense. Sandwiched between emails with titles like, I know what you really want, and let's meet up and play, was a response that just had FOMO in the subject line. I didn't recognize the word at first, so I looked it up online and read everything I could find on the subject. Known as the loneliest star, it was the kind of reference I immediately related to, and obscure enough that it felt clever. Now to see if the attached message lived up to that opening. I'm new to everything despite having been here for years, so the simplest things are all treasures to me. No one seems to find the joy in the everyday that I do. They don't see the beauty because to them it's so common as to be unremarkable. A light that's not reflected back surely must die over time, or is that just hope diminishing thanks to loneliness? Imagine how solitary those far-flung stars must feel, yet they keep shining on faithfully. I wish that I had their fortitude. Who are you? Wow, I didn't know who this person was, but I needed more. They asked who I am, and I wasn't sure how to answer that. How much should I reveal at the outset while keeping this intrigue going? Suddenly, I felt pressured. I'd never had a response this perfect before, and I didn't want to blow it. I thought about it for a while before I started typing. I knew I could maintain a facade of mystique and wonder. It would be easy enough. I'd been writing like this my whole life, well before I started sending these sad, yet hopeful little missives out into the ether. But this time I wanted to be the person I honestly am, both poetic and dreamy, and also someone who goes to work at a dreadfully mundane job and drops crumbs down her cleavage and wishes that people would take a moment to look around them. I couldn't have an authentic connection if I only showed an idealized version of myself, could I? And that is what I thirsted for, that true connection. I spent my days with my body going through the paces of living a normal life, more or less, while my mind went on nonstop with an internal monologue about all the things I saw and the potential that other people seemed to ignore. I've been told that I'm the walking personification of stop and smell the roses. That's not wrong. I know there are others out there like me, but the struggle to find them has left me feeling more isolated every day. I wrote, I'm a human in conflict because what passes for life these days doesn't seem to have room for what I treasure. Yesterday, I noticed a small pink flower growing from a crack in the curb, close to where cars whizzed by, ignored by people rushing to jobs where they'll sit at a desk and look at mind-dulling papers or screens for the rest of the day. I feel a deep kinship with that blossom, persevering in a hostile environment and even managing to bloom. I'm moved by art and music, but even more by blue skies and trees that spread their canopies confidently across that sky. I'm often melancholy, but I'm also joyful. Are you also full of conundrums? You can call me Trist if you like. Maybe it was too soon to give anything to identify me. Tristan is my given name. But I was feeling bold and maybe a little reckless, bolstered by the quality of their response. I knew that giving a little sometimes gets you more, and teasing out the personal bits in these exchanges is half the fun. I felt a little flutter when I hit send. I was already enjoying this. I didn't hear anything back for 2 days. I went through my routine as usual, while I tried not to check my inbox too many times. My boss, Janine, would catch me glancing at my device for the thousandth time and gently make fun of me for caring so much about messages from strangers. I probably shouldn't have told her about my wannabe pen pal situation, but we're friends. And besides, I thought that someone should probably know in case I unexpectedly disappeared or something. I worked at a little artsy boutique in Remington called Under the Leaves. We kept ourselves afloat by handling art purchases and decor for local hotels and businesses with public-facing spaces that wanted to convey a certain aesthetic. There was often a lot of downtime between clients. Janine usually gave me that time to focus on my own projects, but it also allowed my mind to worry about things over which I have no control. Like, of course, the gap between replies from someone interesting. They're a normal person with a job and a life, I told myself. They're busy. It's only been 2 days. What do you expect? They're probably not even as interested in all of this as you are because you're the only loser with nothing else to keep you here. I gave myself this lecture at least 5 times in those 2 days. It didn't really stick. And then on the third day, I found a reply. You are a determined flower, and I'm a lonely star. One reaches for the light, and the other may be too far away to provide what's needed, though it shines brightly. Still, I'll try. What makes you melancholy, Trist? What brings you joy? I spend my time researching, learning about humanity and the world around us. I find it delightful and horrific in turn, and yet I'm always left wanting to know more. For all my studies, I haven't been able to connect with people in meaningful or immersive ways. Not until now, I should say. That is, if you decide to continue this conversation. Attached was a link to a video clip of Fatalism by Massive Attack, Ryuichi Sakamoto and Yukihiro Takahashi remix. Watch this tonight, in the darkness before sleep, and I believe you'll know me a bit better. Know them a bit better? I didn't even know what to call them. In my mind, they became fomohot because to name something is to claim a kind of ownership over it. And the title of the star they referenced in their first email was the only name I had. Not that I wanted to own them, but there was a part of me that already whispered, this could be mine, despite knowing so little about what it was grasping. That still I'll try really won me over. I wrote the following response quickly, dismissing the intrusive AI assistant after it gave me one too many irrelevant suggestions. Like you, the world brings me much joy and is also a source of my melancholy. Watching people be cruel to each other just because of where they were born or who they love, or even things too small to matter, that makes my heart hurt. But I find some melancholy things beautiful, if painfully so. The ache from a piece of moving music, or watching a tragic movie when you know that the characters aren't real, but their suffering evokes a sadness born of empathy. Those things appeal to me. Joy comes from so many sources. Often they're simple ones, an unexpected meeting of friends with tight hugs, or spotting a murmuration of starlings on the swirl over the rooftops at sunset. I expected a similar share in return, but what they wrote next was surprising. I have never seen a murmuration nor heard of it until you mentioned it. I had to do a search for the phenomenon. You've seen these happen in person? The birds move in great clouds and don't collide, even without a leader or a chosen path. Coordination without communication, only observation. Humans could learn much from these birds. Attached is a link to video clip of two women in a small boat, delighted as a murmuration appears over them and puts on a show of swooping and diving. This exchange began an intense back and forth between us over the next couple of days. We talked about stars and space exploration and the hubris of humans who want to wander into inhospitable surroundings when we couldn't be bothered to fix the messes we'd made here on the home planet. I quoted my favorite poem by Keats, To Autumn, and explained in detail why the phrase touch the stubble plains with rosy hue felt so vibrant and evocative to me. They would send me links to interesting things they found in their daily research, as widely varied as a video on why wombat poop is square, or a video tour of the National Gallery of Art, or a long essay about the creeping fascism that was once again happening around the world. I mentioned the idea of figuring out how to take the virtual tour together, and there was a noticeable break in replies for a couple of hours before I received a cautious affirmative. Later that day, they suggested that we could text in addition to emailing each other. I've written a program, a virtual world application that is small and easy to use for private communication. It works on handheld devices and computers. It's encrypted and we can send anything we like back and forth. I promise there are no viruses or exploits to fear. Would you consider it? Attached, link to download Sway Generous app. This time I was hesitant, which didn't make any sense. Wasn't I the one who suggested doing a virtual tour together? I upped the ante, and now they were calling my bluff. Nothing here could be linked directly to me, and if I ever wanted to end things, both my anonymity and theirs would be safe, at least in theory. It had me nervous, but wasn't that why I'd started this conversation in the first place? To meet people like me? I waited until I was home before I downloaded the app to my devices. I ate dinner, took a shower, and talked to my housemates about all the normal things. But I couldn't stop thinking about talking to my mysterious acquaintance. And I knew I was going to try out this program, even if I felt unsure about changing how we communicated. I finally announced that I was going to bed and said goodnight. Once I was in the comfort of my bed, my room illuminated only by the device's screen, I opened up the link in their last message and started the download. The best part? The pop-up message that asserted it would turn off the AI assistant because of program conflicts, and to close the program now if this was an issue. That was a bonus as far as I was concerned. They were right. It seemed easy to use. I clicked on the icon and it opened into a no-nonsense screen. A black background with white text in an old school terminal font, complete with the blinking block cursor after the request name. Wow, throwback. It felt funny using the device's keyboard to type, but I answered Trist and was rewarded with a graphic of the screen filling up with overlapping text that faded away to reveal a customization screen. I could choose plain text or graphics, so I went for the latter. Enter any word or phrase for your avatar. Any word or phrase? A million possibilities passed before my eyes before I decided to see what would happen if I chose murmuration. The screen blurred for a moment, and then I was presented with a surprisingly lifelike animation of a flock of starlings swooping and diving in synchronization. Okay, I pressed the button, and the scene changed into a realistic looking landscape of an open field with trees in the distance and a blue sky above. I found controls in the settings at the bottom left that turned on and off the nature sounds, and when I touched the bottom middle, a text box with a blinking cursor popped up. I didn't know how to find Fomalhaut to talk to them. They said it was private, but surely it couldn't be just the two of us there? The app was certainly well made, nicer than some of the paid ones on my device. I decided the easiest way to go was to announce myself, so I tapped open the text box. Hello? I realized that after I hit enter, the murmuration started to move, a cloud of birds slowly sweeping from one side of the screen to the other in a flowing mass. It was a lovely effect, and again I wondered how it was achieved with such a small program. I'm no expert, but I've been online for a long time and I've used many different programs to connect with other strangers, to share interest and connect on various levels of meaningfulness. And this one was unlike anything I'd seen. It felt more like a high-powered game, both visually and in how smoothly it ran. The graphics looked like I was watching a movie in super high resolution. My assessment was interrupted when a brightly lit orb appeared in the middle of the meadow. It was almost too brilliant to look at directly at first, but the light dimmed gradually to a more comfortable level. I had no idea what was going on until text appeared at the bottom of the screen. I'm here. I'm glad you decided to try this method. A pause, then the words on the screen were replaced. There are also voice capabilities available. Talk to text, or we can choose to speak to each other directly. All your choice, of course. I considered that possibility. Was I ready for this person to hear my voice? And what did they sound like? Deep-voiced, high-pitched, softly spoken? Someone who talked a mile a minute? I decided to be honest. I feel like I'm much more interesting and together in text. Maybe that's just me being nervous, but when I type out responses, I have time to consider my statements and know they're coherent. Would you be disappointed if I waited a little until I felt more comfortable? The orb pulsed for a moment, a subtle shift in brightness. I want you to always feel comfortable around me. You should use whatever method of communication feels safest and natural for you. There was a pause, more pulsing. It was almost hypnotizing to watch. If this container is too strange, we could go back to the other. It's difficult to pick up emotion from text, but that was a sad-sounding statement if I'd ever heard one. No, this is beautiful. You did all of this yourself? Am I the first person to use it besides you? I've never seen anything like it. If you would rather talk instead of type, that would be okay. As long as you don't mind me typing an answer. Pulse, pulse, pulse. I waited, watching the starlings circle about in one section of the sky. I noticed they became more active when I typed. If I put my finger on the screen, I could drag it and change perspective, moving across the field, closer to the trees, or tilting up to look at the sky. I almost jumped out of my skin when the voice boomed out of the tiny speaker. Is this okay? I scrambled to turn down the volume to a reasonable level and muttered, once you're not yelling at me, sure. Okay, maybe say something again so I know how loud it'll be. Then I laughed at myself because, of course, I had an enabled voice, so they couldn't hear me. He? It was a masculine voice, although I knew that didn't mean anything. I figured I'd better ask. Can you say something else, just so I can check the sound? I had it cranked up while I was listening to music earlier, and I forgot to turn it down. And what should I call you? What pronouns do you use? I should have asked this long ago. I'm sorry. Why was my face so hot? Is this better? The voice was masculine, but there was something slightly off about it, and I couldn't figure out what it was. Pronouns don't matter much to me, truthfully. What name have you used so far? What do you call me in your head? I don't exactly call you anything, but in my head I associated you with Fomalhaut because, well, you know, because I referenced the loneliest star. Yes, I didn't have any other kind of reference, like what you look like or, well, anything. And that's okay. I want to know you for who you are on the inside. But you gave me a name and I didn't return the trust. I am sorry. Fomalhaut is good as any, but you can call me whatever you like. And you can use he or they. That would be okay. The way they said okay was odd, uncomfortable. And considering their usual tone in the messages we exchanged, it could well be more casual than they were used to, which might mean that they were nervous too, but trying to loosen up with me. For me? Or maybe I was reading too much into things. There was still something not quite right, and I couldn't figure out what that was. I decided to let it go for now. It was just another mystery that I might get an answer to later, if I was lucky. And that's the first chapter, and I'm going to stop there because too much else will give it away. Thank you for listening. Ah, thank you, thank you, thank you. If you guys want to unmute, ask me questions, whatever, that is cool. I would love to answer questions about anything, you know, about the book, about writing, about music, about what a weirdo I am. I'm down.
Can
We
you hear
don't
me?
have
I've
that
actually
kind
got
of
one.
time.
Oh,
What would you say? Would you say, Stacy?
I was making fun of you. I said, we don't have that kind of time
Oh, come
to
on.
describe what a weirdo you are.
I have a lifetime of weirdo-ness. I have a lifetime of weirdo-ness, let me tell you. Oh, I love reading aloud, but oh my God, my voice.
But I think I interrupted somebody else talking.
oh, it's
So
okay. I
whoever
had
that was, go for it.
no, it's me. This is Emily. I thought I could. I'm nervous about coming up with questions, but I'm like, I think I can do one. So you, without spoilers, obviously, you grapple with a lot of ethical issues in the book, as you said in your note afterward that you read before, but it's after. And I was wondering, something that I really liked about the book was that even books that have a lot of moral clarity sometimes lean very much into that, where they say, this is bad and this is right, and the moral of the story. And I didn't feel like you gave us a moral of the story as much as you had the moral clarity in your writing, like you said, when things didn't feel right or when they felt, but also it felt more like encouraging the reader to do that thinking. And I wondered if that's just how you think, or if that was an intentional choice on your part not to sort of give the moral of the story, but to present something. And I don't mean to say that it wasn't ignored. You weren't just like, I mean, who knows what's right and wrong? It wasn't like that at all. There was a very strong sense of right and wrong, but it was left in the end to the reader to think through that fully, I thought.
The answer to that question is yes. Like I bake in I bake in my ethics into everything that I write because I can't not. I mean, you have a platform, right? And like you have to put those questions out there, but I really don't want to spoon feed it to people. I want people to get there on their own. And I think that in the dilemma in the book that we can't talk about yet, there is a lot of ambiguity and there are good and bad cases for that technology. And I think letting people do their own research on it is really important to understand all of both the bad and good that can come with it. Um, this is a great question because one of the things that I had lined up if people didn't have questions was how much research I put into this for the neurotechnology part of this because there's a big chunk of this book is about neurotechnology and the pluses and minuses of it. And there's some crazy stuff out there to read, y'all. I mean, like, there are a lot of really great things that are happening with this technology as far as helping people overcome neurological diseases, um, to be able to connect their mind and their body back together again, to be able to expand our consciousness in ways that is can be helpful, especially for people who have dealt with disabilities. But then there are these companies that they come into business, they put things into people's bodies, and then they just go out of business and leave them stuck with this tech that is no longer available or useful. There's no clear ethical background behind what's going on with all of this kind of research. And that really bothers me as a highly ethically minded person. That how can you do this where you go into researching on people and you don't consider the outcomes of the people that you're testing on. Like that really bothered me. And of course, combining that with all the other stuff going on, there's already that when I talk about that creeping rise in fascism, I actually wrote this that part of the story last year, and now realizing this is a near future book, it's not even future enough because it's already here. And that kind of technology is also a part of the fascist lean that we're taking. It can be good or it can be used for evil. And I wanted to address all that, but not again, not walk people through coming to the conclusion that I want them to come to. They need to come and think it for about it themselves and come to their own conclusions. I really try. I think it's important to model what you believe. I know you know what I'm talking about. Like that's what we do in the day-to-day world. We model what we believe and we talk about it in ways that hopefully open up people to doing more research and thinking deeper about the things that we just kind of let pass by us. Like Trist, I'm very much frustrated by watching people just letting the world pass by and not paying attention to all the stuff that's going on, both the beautiful and the ugly. It's really easy to get into that 9 to 5. I got to go to work. I got to pay the bills. I have to take care of the kids mindset. It's so easy, but that's how that was designed, and that's what it was designed for. It was designed to keep us not thinking about the bigger questions and questioning the actions of people who have more power than us. So I hope that answered that question because I just went off.
It did. If I can just turn it into a compliment because it was congealing in my mind while you were speaking, you and I have both talked about, obviously there is a need for moral clarity, but there's also a need for critical evaluation, um, that you might not always be right about everything, or that, so and I just love the way in the book that you held the two of those in tension in a way that I think is really important in these times. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so hard. That's the hardest thing I think about writing is not it's not preaching to people, right? It's hard not to preach to people. It's hard not to be like, I see this picture so clearly and not be like, here, you need to see it too. You have to let people get there. You have to encourage them to do it. And one of the things that really frustrates me about what's going on in the US right now with like education and everything is we're taking away that kind of critical thinking of looking at things because everything's being spoon-fed, especially to kids. Um, it's it's just really frustrating to see people not taking things and thinking them through to logical conclusions or even plotting out all the different ways this anything could diverge and become a problem. And we see it in our government too. Like they're just like leaping into stuff without thinking about the big picture. It's just like, well, this is what I want right now. You know, I don't know. It's so frustrating. My Zoom keeps losing my comments and then I have to come back and bring them back again. I'm gonna look through and see if I've lost anything. If anybody had any comments I wanted to talk about? Jorah, who is gone, mentions formerly typesetting for us older folks. One thing you might notice about the book is I typeset it. a little bit larger than what is normal for books these days for adults. And one of the reasons I did that is because my eyes suck. And if I'm going to be reading it, I want to be legible for me, but also because I think that the spacing and everything, when you look at the text, there's a lot of, I play with the text a lot to show like when they're texting back and forth and when they're speaking or things are happening. And it made everything a little bit more impactful that way. But really, it's because I can't see, even with these glasses on. Just so sad. One of the worst things about getting older is that all of a sudden, like, you can have glasses and still it's like a big guess with like, am I going to be able to see this thing or not? You know, half the time I take off my glasses to read now, I can see better to read with my glasses off, and they're progressives, y'all, than I can with them on. That's why when I'm reading aloud too, you'll notice I tend to put my, if you may not have seen it, I tend to put my finger where I am because if I look away to look up at the audience and look back, I can lose my place because everything blurs. It's great. One of my friends says, I've entered my bifocal era. I was like, yeah, it's the best. Let me tell you. Let me tell you. I've been wearing glasses since I was 8, and I probably needed them before that, but I didn't know because how do you know that your eyesight is bad, right? You don't have a base to judge from. And the worse my eyesight gets, the more I'm like, well, what are they going to add? Because I've already got 3 areas to look through. They can't really add much more, but like the reading thing is like the reading part doesn't work right for me. First of all, I don't read down like this. So it's very frustrating. But also I see better. I see clearer close up with my glasses off. So like I have this fourth place. I'm extremely nearsighted for those who don't know. So yeah, it's just trying to read aloud these days. Like so bigger typesetting is great. We have any other questions? Anything you want me to chat about? Ramble on about? Because I will ramble. I can come up with stuff, but I want to answer your questions. Do. Let's see. I have stuff here. Okay, well, I'll talk about Trist a little bit because I have some stuff I wrote out because to make sure I don't just ramble on and on and on. One of the things I talked about is Trist is modeled on, in some part, on me and my experience. Um, And one of the experiences, the direct experience, is emailing strangers through various platforms in order to make connections with people who are more concerned about deep thinking and living outside of accepted norms and feeling passionately about unexpected things, especially artistic and or obscure things. And over the years, like even pre-internet, I corresponded with a variety of people, and every person that I have corresponded with has been really interesting. A cool thing about that is like some of my pen pals have become friends, and I have known them for almost 40 years, some of them. Other ones were just like, a 2 or 3 time thing. Like we would talk some and then things would just drift apart. Um, I challenged people to guess like what parts of things Tris talked about were based in reality. And I'll tell y'all, since you're here, the whole thing with the bike, the guy who rode the bike and had the little gathering of friends over by the Jones Falls, that's totally true. Um, is really funny because like he just went into the he had the best stories. I didn't talk to him for very long, but he had the best stories. We traded some really crazy ones that both of us have had. But yeah, he rode all over the city all the time. Like that was his mode of transportation. And he had this group of friends. They all went down and the Jones Falls, for those who don't live in Baltimore, it's this kind of it's a waterway that runs through the city and is sort of the life heart of the city, but it's also really representative of the city because it's beautiful and kind of dirty. There's been a lot of efforts to have conservational efforts with it. Um, you can go there and you can see herons and other birds making nests and like all kinds of wildlife, but then like some trash will float by and like sometimes there's sewage leaks down towards the bottom of it. And it goes all the way through. It starts up in the county and goes all the way through the city and empties out into the harbor. So I use it a lot in my stories because it really represents everything about Baltimore to me. And in this story, I of course brought it up because that whole thing with the guys, like just sort of hanging out in the living room space of the city, next to the water, just cracked me up. It's just such a Baltimore thing. And it is very true that this is the kind of place that you can get away with a lot if you look like you're supposed to be there. If you're just like, oh, no, no, this is what we do. We hang out here. People don't bother you. It's like you can just kind of move with confidence and bullshit your way through all kinds of stuff. But it's easier if you're a white guy, of course, which this guy was. Um, so that's the kind of thing that I drew from. I Most of the people that I connected with were either through the backs of magazines and things like that, and then later on through Craigslist and places like that. Even my partner, who is here, hello, we met through OkCupid. So like I have a long history with finding people online, people that I know through social media. I have become good friends with because I'm open and I just bleh, my whole story to people, and I'm willing to hear their whole stories too, which goes back to that whole thing with Tristan, like talking about how people just pass each other by. If you're open, if you're willing to like let people tell you their stories, it is amazing the kinds of long-lasting connections that you can have. You can you can gain so much just by allowing yourself to be somewhat vulnerable. And you don't have to open yourself fully, but just that willingness to be vulnerable is really it's enticing. And it often will engender the same kind of response. Not always, again, like Trista's very honest, like I could get killed, but if you're careful, if you're very careful about, making sure that you look for the signs, if you get the ick, pay attention to that, you can really make some lifelong, deep, amazing connections just by being willing to put yourself out there and not close yourself up and do that whole 9 to 5, just making it through life thing. Um, I'm a weirdo because I don't do the 9 to 5 thing. I did it some, really hated it, and then I got sick. But even before I got really, really sick, I was moving out of that. I was trying to really make my art, be my lifetime, to be the thing that I put all of my energy and love into. And not everybody gets that. Not everybody's allowed to have that kind of privilege. Um, Not to say that it wasn't hard and that I didn't starve at points, because I sure did. In other books I write about living on the street, yes, I have done that. It is real. Like those things are real. I have done all those things. But to me, it was worth it. And I think it would be great if people would put at least a little bit more energy into embracing more of what they love, if they can find a way to scrape that space in their lives free, from all of this that's pressing down on us, because that's what lights us up inside. That's what makes life worth living, right? That's what that's why Trist is so frustrated, because she sees all these beautiful things and people walking by them and not noticing them. And it hurts. It hurts to see that and not be able to point out to people like there's all this beauty around you, but you have to focus on it. You have to focus on that too. I don't know. The whole point of writing these stories, and to some degree, is to kind of shake people and be like, please look at this stuff. Pay attention to this stuff. It's here. We can't let that go. That is the whole point. The whole point of all of this. The other stuff is just so like we can like stay alive. You know, this the art, the plants, the birds, the beauty. That is the point of being here. Samantha says, I'm not this eloquent when I ramble. I'm glad you think I'm being eloquent. I'm just bleh. I open my mouth and stuff comes out. I I just don't know. It just these are things that mean a lot to me. So that is why I can talk about it so much, because it's my whole motivation, right? This is the whole reason I started writing in the first place is that I wanted people to get shaken up out of that everyday sort of doldrum and think about things. And I mean, that's why like we all write, the people who write, that's what we do, right? We want to give people these stories and be like, look at this, look at this. Did you notice this? Did you think about that? Because it's hard to it's hard to like focus away from all the stuff that you have to do to stay alive. So we need people to be like, hey, over here. This is the cool stuff. Come on over. My computer's telling me it's almost time to wrap this up. But I like you guys so much. I like talking to y'all. And if anybody else has any more questions or wants to hear anything. Oh, also, if you haven't listened to the soundtrack, which is on Tidal and Spotify, but I need to go look at Spotify and make sure that I've got everything in there the way that I wanted. Tidal is the official one. Um, you don't have to, but it has some of the songs that are mentioned in here, and also it gives that whole vibe, and it kind of gives you the idea of some of the stuff that Trist and Foe trade back and forth with each other music wise. Um, some of the music actually is inspired by yet another connection that I had through pen palery like that, where we would send each other songs. And it was very much that same kind of vibe. So like it all goes together. And the link is in my it's on my website, but I'll also paste it up here in case you want to get it. If you don't have Tidal or don't want Tidal, let me know. And you all have my email or social media, and I will come up with a different way to get it to you. That's the link to it there. I use streaming because that's a thing that most people can access, and I don't do it on YouTube because it's harder, especially because this one has a lot of songs on it. Um, I used to DJ for those who don't know, so I think a lot in music. That's like a huge part of like how I perceive the world. So like having that kind of thing, I do a soundtrack for everything that I do, and I like to share them. And there's something else I was going to say, and I've just totally freaking forgot about it. So, any questions? Anyone? Anyone? No? All right. Well, then I guess I should call it a party. I'm so grateful for all of you who gave the time to come here and listen to me. And I love you all. Seriously, you all are the people who give me hope. Um, Anybody who wants to know more or wants to talk more about the story, who's read it, um, just contact me. You can contact me through email or social media. I love to yap. Ask Stacy or Emily or Christopher, they will tell you. Um, I never shut up. Um, anyway, I love you guys all, and thank you so much for coming. Thank you for all your support. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.